So we will, at this point, recess to closed session, and we will return at 5 o'clock.
Test. Testing, testing. Good? city clerk?
Yes. Can I help you?
I hope so.
Okay. So public comments for the city council agenda are at 7 o'clock.
Oh, the woman told me to be here at just before 5.
Hold on a minute, let me.
No, I don't. Charlotte's not going to let me speak 2 hours early. Can I give you that now and come back at 7?
Absolutely.
So then I'd be number 1.
You will be number 1. Yeah.
He was here 15 minutes, maybe a little more early.
Yeah, if you want, can you come back at 7?
Sure.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to be talking about 2 of the city's employees who are so incredibly good and efficient and nice
Wonderful.
and smart.
Maybe we could have you here at 5 and 7.
There's a man who's the coordinator between Spectrum and Frontier.
John Fraser.
Yes.
Yeah.
Several years ago, I was having a horrible problem. And Frontier, that's not right.
Yeah.
It is Frontier.
Yeah.
Said we can be there in 20 days to fix it.
Oh, I remember.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, I came in and said, this guy is fabulous.
I remember. Yeah.
And at the time, what was his name? He was Morgan, Mike Morgan. Said, nobody ever comes in and says nice things. Every
I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Camarillo Board of Library Trustees. Could we have a roll call, please? Or do we need to? We already did that. Let the record reflect that we are all here. Mr. Kildee, do you lead us in the flag salute?
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any amendments to the agenda? No? Any public comments? None? Okay, we'll move to the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And it looks like it's passed unanimously. And we will move on to oral communications. Do we have staff report?
Yes, we do have Mandy Nazar, Camarillo Library Director, and she's with us tonight to give a few brief comments.
Good afternoon. So we're at the end of summer, which means that we just wrapped up our summer reading program. When we started this program earlier this year, we were not sure how our attendance would be with the pandemic, but I am so pleased with the positive response that we've had with our community. In total, we registered 607 children, 117 teens, and 167 adults. We even actually registered more adults and teens this summer than the last time we offered this in 2019. So we are so grateful to all the Camarillo readers who participated in our summer reading program. And as we move to the start of a new school year, the library is promoting Library Card Sign-Up Month in September. So staff will be active in encouraging new library card sign-ups by promoting our expansive collection and our many educational resources. In addition, our Russell Fisher Business Coordinator, Nicole, will be coordinating a workplace development series every week in September. So these workplace trainings will cover business topics such as resume building, cover letters, job searching, and job interviews. So we encourage our participants to attend these workshops to help them prepare for our Camarillo Library Job Fair, which will be held in our community room on October 8th. I also want to remind you again that we are having our One City, One Book event on September 25th at 2 p.m. with author Kate Quinn. The book is The Rose Code, and we have an abundance of copies for people to check out. We also have children and teen program that correlate to this event, so please check out our event calendar for more information. So thank you so much for your support, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, Mrs. Craven?
I just thought of this, but a year or two ago, we adopted a policy that said if you hadn't used your library card in, 2 years, that we dropped it. And I was wondering if we have, because of the pandemic, have paused that policy.
That's something I'll look back to, and I could report that later at another time.
I know we had curbside pickup, but I think a lot of people just weren't into that or whatever, and there was also quite a while that we were closed. So I hope that you'll look into that.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Any other comments or questions from trustees? Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District. Let the record reflect that all members of the Board of Directors are present. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none. Any public comments? All right, hearing none, seeing no public comments, let's move to consent items A through E. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, tie goes to the runner. I think Mrs. Craven had the motion and Mr.
I'll
Kildee
second
had the
it then.
second. With that in mind, can we please vote? All right, that's approved unanimously. Let's see, any oral communications by members of the City Council? Mrs. Craven.
I have quite a few. I attended the CASA conference a couple weeks ago, and I did pick up quite a few things, and I'll just give you some highlights. But the first one is that the next conference will be January 19 through 21, so please mark your calendars. These are also always very good, and it's the only place you get an education on sewage treatment. In the Federal Ledge Committee, we discussed H.R. 2482, the Microgrid Act by Panetta, and it's co-sponsored by Julia Brownlee, and I suggest we look into supporting it because we are interested in more money for the rest of our microgrids. In addition, the State Ledge Committee, the state non-flushable white bill, AB 81, or AB 818, is expected to pass the Senate at any time, and I haven't received a notice, so I gather it hasn't passed yet, but there is no opposition at all. The manufacturers are supporting this, and so I think we need to watch closely for a request to come from CASA to send a letter to the governor so that he'll sign it. Every once in a while, something goes all the way through, and then it doesn't get signed, so we need to let him know we think that's important at the proper time. Additionally, there was some discussion about the governor's emergency proclamation on energy demand, and it might be good to have somebody check that out. We might be able to get reimbursed for the money we've already spent on backup power systems. So that struck me as something that would be really good. And they reminded us 2 or 3 times to be sure to ask for earmarks early next year. The earmarks are here to stay, so we need to, when Representative Brownlee is accepting requests, we need to be ready to go with them. The most interesting talk, and I'm sure Tony will agree, was by the city manager of the city of Paradise. He talked about how he wasn't the city manager during the fire 2 years ago, but that city manager left and he took over, and I believe he was the finance director before that. He was fascinating, and the one takeaway was stress test your insurance. Don't rely on FEMA. I'm sure Tony will have more on that at some point tonight. Okay, so that's all I have.
Okay. Anybody else? I do have a few comments on the CASA conference, just to supplement. By the way, for those folks who are in the audience and watching on TV, we are inaugurating a new Surface Pro computer tonight. And so, of course, the first time you do this, there are glitches, and I can't get the agenda in front of me. All I have is this giant screen that says waiting. So if you'll forgive me, I'm gonna go back to my paper agenda for a minute. But with regard to the CASA conference, just to supplement a few things, there was quite a bit of discussion on several regulatory hot topics that are of specific concern and concern to us in Camarillo because of both environmental compliance issues, not that we have adverse compliance, but because it costs money, a lot of money to comply, and particularly that's with respect to microplastics, our sewer service management plans, and air toxics. And so there were some very important sessions on that. We also heard from Sean McGuire, who is a member of the State Water Resources Control Board. He spoke for, oh goodness, half an hour, 45 minutes on the drought and on what is coming, and his remarks were particularly, I thought, appropriate. Just one thing to pick up on what Mrs. Craven said. For the town of Paradise, what is being estimated right now is the construction of a sewer system at an aggregate cost of about $182 million. Think about that. $30 million for right-of-way, $152 million for the infrastructure itself. Prior to this, they had been on septic, as I understand it. So think of the capital costs associated with that. And I will echo again what Mrs. Craven said in terms of the importance of stress testing our insurance policies. I know that we have a specific amount set aside in our reserves relative to that, and that's something that maybe we can talk about offline. But anyway, it was a very, very good conference. Okay, I won't go any farther than that. Anybody else on comments? I still don't have an agenda in front of me, so an electronic one, so I'm going to go to the paper one. Any other oral communications? Anything from staff? All right, with that then, we're going to recess at the appropriate time to close session relative to items F and G on the agenda. Mr. Pierrick, do you want to reference what those closed session items are right now?
You might as well. So then
Please.
when we recess, we'll have already taken care of that. So when we do go back to closed session, we are going to have additional closed sessions, and these will be for the CSD. There's two. One of them is a conference with real property negotiator. The authority is Government Code Section 54956.8. The property is at 3609 Vista Mercado. The agency negotiators are listed in the agenda, as are the negotiating parties. Under negotiation are price and terms of payment for an easement. And the second closed session for the CSD is the same as the first one. It's a conference with real property negotiator. This property is located at 95 Dawson Drive. Same agency directors and negotiating parties, different negotiating party. This one is Materia, LLC, and under negotiation are price and terms of payment for easement. You might want to ask if there's any public comment on those closed sessions.
Are there any public comment on those closed sessions? Hearing none, the Sanitary District Board meeting will be in recess.
I'll call the city council meeting back to order. Are there any amendments to this agenda?
I'd like to pull something from consent.
Oh, sure. Which item?
Item 9.
I'm sorry.
J.
J. Okay.
I don't know where that came from.
So J, we will take up immediately after the consent calendar. Any other items anybody would like pulled? Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar with the exception of item J?
So moved.
A second.
Is a motion and a second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item J, and let's let everybody have time to get there.
Mayor Craven, you have a presentation
Oh,
before the consent calendar.
I apologize, I was jumping right down there. We have a presentation on Coastal Cleanup Day, September 18th.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and staff. I am Jessica Ouellette, the City of Camarillo's Stormwater Program Manager, and I will be providing information about this year's 37th Annual Coastal Cleanup Day event in Camarillo. Unlike last year, where the event was more of an individual, clean up your own neighborhood event, this year's event will once again take place at the two locations in Camarillo on September 18th, 2021, from 9 a.m. to noon. However, we are encouraging our residents to continue the individual neighborhood cleanups beyond this one-day event for the whole month of September. Volunteers will be able to continue tracking their cleanup totals using the Ocean Conservancy's Clean Swell app, which I will discuss a little later. As you will recall, last year's cleanup event was a little different due to the pandemic. The event was a clean up your own neighborhood event held during the month of September. The city did not host any specific sites where volunteers would have to congregate. 15 volunteers removed 283 pounds of trash in their neighborhood in September. However, the cleanup of Camarillo's neighborhoods did not stop at the end of September. From September 2020 through the end of June 2021, 52 volunteers removed 347 pounds of trash in Camarillo. Although these numbers are down considerably from normal event years, where Camarillo averages about 200 to 300 volunteers and 900 to 1,000 pounds of trash, we are very grateful for those volunteers who continue to help keep Camarillo beautiful. The map on this slide provides the locations that volunteers cleaned in Camarillo from September of 2020 to June of 2021. The volunteers used the Ocean Conservancy's Clean Swell app to record their cleanup results. The numbers on the map represent the amount of cleanups held at that location in Camarillo. This map, as well as cleanup statistics from all over the world, is available from the Ocean Conservancy's Clean Tides program at the website noted on the slide. Last year, the number one item collected in Camarillo was cigarette butts, with 357 cigarette butts collected. Also, please note that over 40 gloves and masks, or PPE, were retrieved from our environment. Again, these numbers are considerably lower than prior year's numbers, which average between 2,500 and 3,500 volunteers and around 17,000 pounds removed, but they are still significant. As in September alone, there were 1,052 volunteers that removed over 6,000 pounds of trash countywide. We look forward to this year's event in Ventura County with 19 cleanup sites. These are the top 10 items that were picked up in Ventura County. And as you can see, food wrappers was the number one item removed, with 10,360 pieces removed. And cigarette butts was the second most collected item in the county. Almost 1,300 gloves and masks were removed from our environment. Throughout California, from September 2020 to June of 2021, there were 25,993 volunteers that removed over 185,000 pounds of trash and recyclables from over 12,000 miles. As has been the case for several years, the number one collected item in California continues to be the cigarette butt, and over 26,000 gloves and masks were removed from the environment. From September 2020 through June 2021, over 100,000 volunteers removed over 2.4 million pounds of trash in the United States. And again, over 46,000 gloves and masks were removed throughout the United States. Since 2017, almost every item on this top 10 list of trash picked up contains plastics, such as the 559,000 cigarette butts that were removed last year. We are very excited to be back at our 2 cleanup sites again in Camarillo this year. I want to take the time to thank the City Council and City staff for making this possible. One cleanup site is in the Mission Oaks Barranca, which is located off of Mission Oaks Boulevard at Mission and Oak Canyon Road. Volunteers should meet in the grass area next to the tennis courts. The second location is in Callegas Creek. Volunteers should meet above the creek at the intersection of Creekside Road and Paseo del Campo. Since we are trying to make this a zero-waste event, we encourage volunteers to bring their own bags and reusable water bottles and gloves, but we will supply those items to them, along with a data card to record statistics on what they are removing from the waterway. This information is put into the Ocean Conservancy's international database. As it may be a warm day, we also encourage volunteers to apply protective sunscreen and wear appropriate attire. The terrain in the creek is not suitable for strollers or small children, so we encourage volunteers with small children to come to the Mission Oaks Barranca site. Also, as a token of our appreciation for their service, we will have a limited number of t-shirts and hats to give to volunteers who come to help clean up our waterways. Volunteers are also invited to participate throughout the month by cleaning up their neighborhoods, parks, and other local areas. Trash from inland areas flows downstream to the coast, so cleaning up neighborhood trash helps prevent marine debris, Gather supplies from your home, download the Clean Swell app to count your trash and to have your trash counted, and clean on your own time throughout September. As you are aware, part of the annual event is to collect data on the trash volunteers are removing, which is compiled into a worldwide database by the Ocean Conservancy. Although we will provide data cards at the event locations, we encourage volunteers to download and use the Clean Swell data collection app in order to record their finds and be counted towards the volunteer and trash totals for Camarillo. Volunteers can check out their cleanup history, so anytime, anywhere, they can see the impact they have had on making our creeks and oceans a healthier ecosystem. More information on this app can be found on the Ocean Conservancy's website. Again, this year's event will be held September 18th from 9 a.m. to noon, and self-guided cleanups all month long. I want to thank the City Council and City staff for again supporting this important event in Camarillo and in helping to keep our environment clean. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will go, we've approved the consent calendar, and we will go to item J on the consent calendar, which we pulled. So everybody get to item J in this new system, except for me, I'm in the old system. Okay, would you like a staff report, or did you have questions?
I don't think I need a report. I don't have questions, probably just comments about it.
So let me first say, this is policy 1.04, scheduling city council meeting agenda items. Okay.
Well, I guess I do have one comment, one question, sorry. For the first time, if this makes sense, that a council member would bring something that they want to place on the agenda. So they've done their own work for that first, I guess, mini presentation. Would public comment and deliberation be expected at that point?
If you bring it in, are you asking when you first ask for it, like under council comments?
No. So under this policy, if we had a request that requires additional information, then we get limited staff assistance
Okay.
to provide a brief introductory agenda report. So at that time, we can deliberate and discuss it and have public comment.
Right. That's the intention of, or that was the intention. It'll be on the agenda, but it's limited, and that's when the person or persons who requested it present their case to the other council members.
So it just seems to me that's going to be then a deliberation with limited information. And it seems to me that we're taking something that was fairly straightforward, and it's getting a little bit more confusing. It seems to me that it's going to take more staff time if we do one presentation and then decide to do it again. It doesn't sit right with me. It's not feeling right. I think when we have words like provide limited staff assistance, what does that mean? Is that a time limit? Is that?
Well, and thank you, Santangelo, for that. I can tell you, well, staff can certainly respond, but I can tell you what the intent of the policy committee was. So, first up is a council member saying, okay, I want to bring this for consideration at a meeting. And that would take one other council member. And I think, I don't know what Mr. Pierce would say, but I would say that's probably the end of the discussion at that point. because it's not a matter that's been agendized. Correct, Mr. Pierik, at that first step? Okay. The record will reflect Mr. Pierik said, yes, it's correct.
And actually,
Even those microphones.
I got the microphone on this time, and the answer is it's correct.
Thanks. Okay, so then you get to, the second part, which is the limited staff assistance, which is one of the reasons in the first place for trying to change this, because of the burden on staff in preparing full staff reports and doing all the backup work without knowing whether or not the rest of the council was interested in doing. So staff will have to describe to you what is meant by limited staff assistance, but what I think limited staff assistance means is that if I bring an item and I get one of my colleagues to say, yeah, go ahead, then I'm going to go ahead and prepare, for the most part, that staff report with perhaps some editing or perhaps just some very general limited assistance from staff, and then bring that to council. And then, as a final step, if there is sufficient interest, then we would put it at a final for future consideration if the majority of the council agrees to explore it at a further meeting. And at that time, then there would be a full-on workup by city staff. And I'm hoping I'm explaining this correct. Ms. Nichols and Mr. Ramirez can correct me, but we were attempting, hopefully, to give credence to the concern by staff in terms of the burdens on staff and all the priorities that we've given in our council goals and objectives, et cetera, their workload, but at the same time trying to work it with your comments in mind, with your concerns in mind. So we're trying to thread that needle. And so anyway, I thank you, Madam Mayor, and perhaps staff would like to quantify what limited staff assistance actually means.
Yeah, and it's difficult to quantify what it means. It's going to depend, but it's enough assistance to provide the council that brief introductory report, so that city council members who requested the item, that your reasoning or information that you may have is in that report, so that then the city council can deliberate and discuss it in the next meeting or a future meeting. So it may vary, but we didn't want this first initial report to be that full agenda report, just the information necessary to get the point across and to open that discussion with the city council.
Let me ask Susan if that explained it, or if she.
It explains it. I don't think my struggle and my challenge with this policy, the way it's rewritten, is not, it's not understanding it. It's just whether I think it's an improvement.
Okay. Sean?
I understand well, I know we can play hypotheticals all day long, but I do just want to clarify. I know that as the policy stands now, and I know there's not a lot of policy around the procedures we have right now in bringing things to subsequent, in agendizing subsequent items on our agenda. I presume, and I read this to infer that there is some discretion here where a member may bring something up for a subsequent agenda if it is, in fact, urgent, or the staff and or the council gives kind of unanimous consent or approval in moving on something quicker, that we don't necessarily, that this is not something that impedes a more speedy implementation of something. If it's something simple, I understand there's something complex, but I'm trying to understand, that's my concern. If it's something that we need to move on, just say quicker, and I don't have anything immediate, but how might we use discretion in and around this policy to make sure it doesn't become an impediment?
Well, I think the short answer to that question is if that is the case and something needs to be expedited and or It's an issue that needs to come before the council. I think that's within my discretion to set the agenda and put that item on. But that would not be a case of where a council member had an individual issue that they wanted to bring forward without any knowledge on where, the rest of the council stands on that issue. So those issues that you're referring to, I would be agendizing those items based on kind of day-to-day operational.
And that's kind of the process we have now, too. If I were to bring something, I got a second, depending on staff time required to go through, depending on the scope and complexity of that potential request or issue or whatever it is. I understand there are some things that come to us at the next immediate agenda, next immediate meeting, and there are things that take a month or two oftentimes because staff needs to research something. So that'll still, I guess, be followed, and there's going to be reading between the lines as to, and discretion on your part as to what is urgent and what is not.
Yeah, and I think we do that on an ongoing basis, currently.
Just one more comment. The last paragraph of the policy, if I want to play devil's advocate, I suppose that it could be jerry-rigged so that you have a member of public request something, put it in writing, and then all I need is 2 council members to get it on the agenda and get a full staff report.
With the timing up to the discretion of the city manager.
Yeah, but it's easier, so the member of a public has an easier chance probably of getting it on an agenda with a full staff report than it does if I originate the request.
And remember, the member of the public has to provide all of the backup material, which is what, in the second step, the city council members being asked to bring.
But you only need then 2 council members to want it placed.
You only need
Full
2
agenda.
council members to,
2 council members only gets you the mini, the mini report, or the mini staff help. That's just what I'm calling it.
okay,
The shortened conversion.
that's the way it's always been. The last paragraph that you're mentioning is not changed.
I realize that, but
Okay.
with the changes above, when I'm comparing the 2 methods of getting something on the agenda,
You're still going to have to do
it's
all
now
the work.
easier for the member of a public to initiate it.
Okay, are there any other concerns or questions?
Can I make a comment?
Mr. Kildee?
I don't know if I can really shed any light on this, but I'll attempt to. And I'll speak from a city council member's perspective here that there's been, shall I say, situations in the past where council members actually gone to a department head and/or the city manager and started a process on an idea that either he or she had. And staff was spending an inordinate amount of time even on the research of this, even before it even became up to the city council to decide whether or not we wanted to agendize that or not. And present council is excluded from this, but I think we also have to look at future councils here that, we have somewhat limited staff here, and they have a lot of work. In my opinion, we pay our staff very well here, but we also push them, and we expect really high-quality work here, too. So when an individual comes in and asks them to do something else before it's even been agendized here, I think, and I was not on the committee, but it appears to me limited staff assistance that they'll do a limited amount of research to try to help the individual before he or she brings it forward to the council here, so they don't get totally bogged down on an issue that in the past has actually taken quite a bit of time to do to even get it on the agenda. So it appears to me that's what the intent is here to try to do. So those are my thoughts and comments.
What are the wishes of the council?
I'll move policy 1.04 amendments as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second, please vote. Motion carries 4-1 with Ms. Santangelo dissenting. Okay, next item on the agenda is item T, investment policy. So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of time to get to item T. Got it? One has it up. You still have a blank page?
Madam Mayor, just so city staff knows, I'm still getting a waiting section for a motion to adopt the prior item. And it's not allowing me to advance it past that, so I'm struggling with trying to get to the next agenda item.
We have
just so
to,
you know.
we have to minimize that. In the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see a 3/4 of a box with an arrow pointing down. You're going to hit that, it'll minimize that screen and allow you to continue on to the agenda.
Thank you. Just did that.
Thank you.
It's like a screen for
Okay,
motions.
does everybody
or
have it
something.
up? This is the very first time we've ever used this, so for members of the audience, it's a new process for us. Okay, so could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. This item is to adopt the city's investment policy, which does have some proposed updates to it that we'll be discussing. Pursuant to the city's investment policy, it will be reviewed annually by the Investment Committee and by the City Council. The city's investment policy is subject to the investment restrictions specified in the California Government Code, and in many cases, our policy is more restrictive than the Government Code. For example, certain instruments or investments allowed by the Government Code are not included in our current investment policy. The Investment Committee met on July 27th to review the policy, had some discussion, and are recommending the changes that are included in the red line version that is attached to the agenda report. And we have Jason Schmidt from Chandler Asset Management, our investment advisors, here to walk you through the proposed changes to the policy.
All right, good evening, everybody.
Good
Nice
evening.
to see everybody. I think that we've all met before on the committee before. So, going to take you through the policy changes and talk about them a little bit. I'm going to start off with page 4 of 13 of the investment policy, and we're going to talk about supranationals first, and want to make sure that everybody's on that page.
So let's wait a second till people get there.
Page 4, was it? Hang on here. Yes, I got it. Yeah.
It's the new number 7 on the attachment. Attachment, or item T, attachment 2, and then it's number 7. Okay. Does everybody else have it? Kevin, do you have it? Kevin?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. This is the software glitches we were discussing before.
Do you have it up, Kevin?
I do.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
No worries. So what we're asking today is to allow for the city to purchase supranational securities. And so these securities are debt obligations. They are the senior unsecured debt is the minimum as far as the debt level that we can purchase. So these are bonds.
We can only purchase 3 institutions of supranationals. There are different supranationals around the world, but these are US-based supranationals. And what makes that important? All the different laws and everything like that for the securities will be adjudicated in the United States because they are Washington, D.C.-based organizations. In addition to that, the securities, the 3 organizations, also the U.S. is the largest shareholder in those organizations. So it's really an instrumentality of the United States. Those 3 organizations are the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the International Finance Corporation, and the Inter-American Development Bank. In addition to that, we can only buy securities that mature 5 years or less. In addition to that, we can only buy securities that are AA or better. That's per the California Government Code. So the California Government Code requires that you purchase securities that are AA or better. These 3 organizations are rated AAA by both Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. And so we're also looking that no more than 30% of the portfolio can be placed in these types of securities and no more than 10% per issuer.
It says 15 in my book.
Yes, that was an example of something that the government code allows up to 30%, but after discussions with the investment committee, they felt more comfortable reducing that to a 15%, so much more restrictive than the government code.
Okay.
So that was part of the red line, yes.
Any questions on that piece of it?
Yes.
Okay.
I have several.
Okay.
Excuse me. I would like this to say securities or bonds. If you look at supranationals and then look at the definition in the back, it says it's a bunch of countries, and we're not going to buy countries, we're going to buy securities or bonds. So that may be the vernacular for investors, but I think we need to state what it is we're planning to buy.
If I can ask, is it already stated in here? Because if you look at the actual investment policy, it states exactly there that we can only buy securities of the Inter-American Development Bank, which is an organization, the International Finance Corporation, which is an organization, and also the Inter-American Development Bank, which is its own organization. So those are the 3 entities that we can buy. We can't go out and buy bonds from France or anything like that. They have to be of those organizations. And when you purchase those securities, they're in the name of those organizations.
So you have an objection to saying supranational securities?
We say already in there that they
I know you say later on. I'm just asking up there.
Up.
The very first word is supranationals, and I'm asking if you would object to our saying supranational securities.
Give me a moment. Let me read through it real quick to make sure. No, I think I'd be okay if we put that addendum in there and say supranational securities. I think
And I'm asking that because of your definition in the back. If you look up the word supranationals in the definition section, which we're going to get to, that's been added. It says it's a multinational organization. It doesn't say it's a security.
That's fine. We can
Okay.
definitely, I think that doesn't take away anything from what we're trying to achieve here and would add some clarity to the overall statement.
So does anybody else have anything on this one?
Yes.
Okay, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Jason, for being here. A couple of things. First of all, when we're talking about NRSRO ratings, we're talking about any one of 9 entities that are currently registered with the SEC, right?
Correct.
So the fact is, let me just give this context. I mean, the city has investments, to put this in context, the city has current investments in excess of $230 million. So we're talking about a substantial amount of money, recognizing that the bulk of that, about close to 160, 170 million is in life. We have about 65 million in these securities, so this is a really important topic. My first concern on the supranationals is if you had only one NRSRO with a AA category, AA rating, then we could purchase it. according to this policy. So my primary question is, why wouldn't we want to have it at least at AAA, like government or U.S. Treasury securities?
So what we did is we took verbatim from the California Government Code and how they articulate that in the code. And the code says essentially that you can buy securities that are AA or better. If you wanted to move towards a AAA rating, I would have no problem with that, because all three of these organizations are rated AAA by at least one of the NRSROs. In fact, between the major NRSROs, which would be Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, they maintain a AAA rating from those organizations.
So my first comment would be that we change AA to AAA, because the California Government Code is only a floor. It's not where we want to set it. But in terms of a differential investment risk, well, no, listen, in terms of return, is there a substantive difference between a AA versus a AAA supranational?
No, because all the organizations that you can purchase today maintain AAA ratings. And so there is not a AA rated security that you can buy today that is issued by the three organizations that we have defined in the policy.
Okay, so since we have a triple-legged stool, I mean, it's liquidity, safety, and return appropriate, the appropriate level of return, my suggestion would be that the first amendment we take is that we specify that it has to be at least AAA.
What?
I had a...
Well, let's talk about this, and then before we talk about other changes, okay? Does anybody support that? Does anybody object to that? Okay? I think everybody agreed to that change.
Are they not all AAA right now?
They're all AAA.
Is there potential in the future to deal with the non-AAA if we don't put this in?
That
Or
would only
is that-
happen if these organizations were downgraded, or if you decided that they issued some kind of subordinate debt, which I would not recommend that the city would purchase. And so to keep at the AAA rating this point in time, here's one of the drawbacks. If these agencies were downgraded below that AAA status, you wouldn't be able to purchase those securities. You may not want to purchase those securities at that point. So I wouldn't be against having the AAA rating. What we did with the revision of the investment policy was really more follow state code, and their minimum rating is AA.
I don't know that we have ever taken the state floor as the way we should do things, so I think I saw everybody saying, go ahead with the AAA in here. Okay.
My second issue is it indicates no more than 15% of the total portfolio, and I realize that that is less than the 30% floor, in this case ceiling, I suppose, of the California Government Code.
Yes.
In my opinion, it should be no more than 10%. It should be equivalent. We have certificates of deposit at 10%. I would have real difficulty authorizing supranationals at 15% of a total portfolio. That's just me. I'm more conservative on it. But would there be, in your view, any material difference in investment earnings if we change 15% to 10%?
In today's market, no. In the future, it's unknown because we don't know what that market would look like. The one thing I would say is that the committee already, when we talked about this, went from that 30% level, which would have been the maximum, all the way down to the 15. So they really have been restrictive when the committee kind of looked at that, but definitely willing to take any actions that the council would like to with this.
Madam Mayor, I can support 10%. I can't support 15%.
I had written 5%. I could go for 10. What do the rest of you feel?
Well, can I,
Mr. Kildee?
Ms. Santangelo and myself, we had a very robust discussion on this one, and I know that the term supernaturals gets people's kind of questioning up, and very much rightly so. I am on another government agency that does invest in supernaturals, and Susan, please jump in if you'd like. When they first approached us with the 30%, we kind of said, well, wait a minute here. First of all, we're not even sure we're going to use this very much, but if we do, we certainly don't want 30%, and a more reasonable amount would be 15%, and that's how we landed on this. I don't really see a big difference between 10 and 15% myself. If the majority feels, they're more comfortable with this, I'll certainly go along with it, but it would appear to me, and I think we did have a discussion with Jason about this too, is there any differences if we do lower it from 15% to another lower number? So I believe we had that discussion as well.
Yes, because we started at 30%, and then we looked at, what was a good compromise for that. So we definitely did go through that overall conversation with the entire committee as we were presenting this to them.
There are more,
anything to add?
agencies starting to invest in the supernaturals too. It's not huge. The other entity that I'm, working with or belong to has used it very sparingly. I'm not even sure we'll even get to the 10%, to be honest with you, but we could. But anyhow, again, I just want to kind of talk a little bit of what the committee's thought process were, that we wanted to cut it down to something a little smaller so we could kind of get more comfortable with this and then deal with it in the future as it may be. So I don't know, Susan, if you want to add anything.
Susan, you're on that committee. Would you like to add?
Yeah, I think it might be even helpful to understand that we're really trying to, we're seeing our investments with, I'm not going to use the right terminology, but that's okay, you'll know what I'm saying. The majority of our investments is in LAIF, and we're trying to transition that into other, to diversify. And while, one of the things that we discussed was that while each of the things we're adding to the policy do bring some element of risk, it's also a risk for us not to diversify and to not have other opportunities, especially in this market. So I don't think there's a big difference between 15 and 10% on that item. I'm fine with going to the 10%. I don't think it's super material.
Tony?
Thank you, and I really do appreciate, Susan and Kevin, all the work you've done. I'm sure you had a very robust discussion on this. I actually misspoke a minute ago because on CDs it's at 15%, but what I was trying to do is compare it to the total portfolio max relative to your next two additional investments that you're asking to be authorized, which we'll get to in a minute. So that's where I was going with it. And again, I appreciate people being comfortable with 10%, and that's why I asked the question in terms of a substantive difference between 10 versus 15% in terms of return, while at the same time preserving safety and liquidity. My last question is it's just a wording issue, and that is in this paragraph 7 in the red line, it says the securities must be rated in a rating category of, well, we will now change that to AAA or its equivalent or better by a NRSRO. Yet in numbers 11 and 12, the MTNSs and the CMOs, it's by at least one NRSRO. And I would ask that we make the language consistent. My suggestion would be we would say in number 7, by at least one NRSRO. And that would be my third amendment to this number 7.
No objection to that one? I see the finance director would like to.
Yes, I think we have one other editorial type change, a minor one that was brought to our attention by Mayor Craven earlier, that this new number 7 now becomes the first time we mention the acronym NRSRO. So we would then spell it out in that section 7 rather than under the new section 8 as the first mention of that nationally recognized statistical rating organization. So a minor editorial there, but one more change that since we're
just to move that up. So we do need to talk about the 10%. We have at least one who'd like to keep it at 15. What do the rest want to do? I'm for changing it to 10.
That's fine.
Okay, I see 4 who'd like to move it to 10. Okay, so then let's go on to the next, which is paragraph 11.
Yes, so these are corporate medium-term notes, essentially corporate bonds. And so we are asking to potentially have these added as a permitted investment for the city. The designations or the restrictions or the criteria that we have is that they must be rated A or better by a NRSRO. And in addition to that, no more than 10% of the portfolio may be invested in these securities, and no more than 5% of the portfolio shall be invested in any single issuer. And so that ensures that it's going to be a diversified portfolio. And also, when you think about California Government Code allows for 30%. And so already taking risk mitigation measures to be more restrictive than California Government Code.
Tony?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In terms of these corporate MTNSs, Jason, I don't have a problem with the 10% total portfolio cap, but I do still have an issue with the rating category of A. Let's say you have let me pick one. I'll pick Fitch as one NRSRO, and that will be on the, if I remember correctly, Fitch is on the alphabetized system, like A, or AAA,
Yes.
AA. So my question is, why would we want to put this as an A? Why would we not want to have at least a AAA rating on this? I'm concerned that with an A-rated note, which is of a lower quality, I'm concerned about the risk attendant with that, notwithstanding perhaps a greater marginal rate of return higher than you would get with an A note.
Right. So let's talk about that as far as kind of the landscape of the corporate bond market today. It's gone through a lot of changes probably since 2008, 2009. It's probably the most material change. Today in the market for AAA rated securities, there are only two companies today that are AAA rated. That would be Johnson & Johnson and Microsoft. After that, the investable universe shrinks materially when you look at just AAA to AA rated corporate securities. The majority of companies are in that single A rated category. And let me give you some examples of some names in order maybe to get a little bit more comfortable with who is a single A rated corporation. John Deere, the tractor maker, is a single A rated company. Merck is actually a single A rated company, some of the drug makers. Pfizer is a single A rated company. And so when you look across the landscape of the overall corporate market, there are very few and far between as far as the number of opportunities to actually invest funds in that AAA to AA category.
What is the differential rate of return, for example, between a Microsoft issuance at AAA versus a Pfizer issuance at single A? And I haven't asked you for examples of AA yet, but I'm going to do that in a minute.
No worries. And so what
You know where I'm going.
Yes. So when I look at that, and I'm going to just couch these, the market changes all the time, but I would say probably 0.25% is the change that you would move from having that AAA rating of Microsoft. And at that point, the way that the market is transacting today, the Microsoft bonds in the open market today are yielding about 5 basis points above U.S. Treasuries. So in some ways, you wouldn't even look at that because the opportunity is not great enough at this point in time. That may change in the future, but it's probably at least 0.25 of a point, and in some ways you could even get up to 0.5% as far as the difference between a Microsoft versus that of a Pfizer or something like that.
Okay, so the difference then is about 25 basis points. What about on a AA return?
A AA, it's about the same as a AAA rated security. There aren't that many AA's either. So if you think about it, you have Procter & Gamble. Actually, one of the newest issuers out there is Amazon, and I would say they're within a couple of basis points of Microsoft. So that opportunity is kind of similar.
And final question, what are the, the availability, if there's two issuers of AAA debt, obviously the availability is limited, but is it still there? Is there still availability of those issuances?
There always is availability, meaning that it's just a matter of the price that you pay for those as far as supply and demand. Typically, when we're buying AAA issuances, if we do that for our clients, we're typically buying those in the new issue market because we believe that's where we get the best value, meaning that these securities are coming out for the first time. And that market for those particular issuers is very sporadic. Maybe you see that once a year, maybe once every 2 years, depending upon what their funding needs are.
Okay, thank you. So just an editorial comment, Madam Mayor. I would personally feel more comfortable since if we go ahead and adopt and authorize investment in corporate medium-term notes. And this, I'll say the same thing with respect to the next category that we talk about too, the CMOs. I would prefer that we at least require a AA rather than a single A. I realize that's more limited, but we still will have some opportunities, and from a safety standpoint, I think that would be preferable, particularly since we're just getting into this market, assuming that we adopt these as authorized investments.
May I ask a clarifying question of that? Because I think the semantics here make a difference. And so when you're saying a AA rated security, and I'm gonna put a word out there, something called a split rated security, a security that has a AA rating by, for example, S&P, but is only rated A by Moody's. Would that be still appropriate in what you're looking at as far as an amendment?
Well, I'm going to answer a question with a question, because here's your language that you use in the policy. The language you use in the policy is in a rating category of A or its equivalent or better by at least one NRSRO.
Right.
So how do you distinguish between the various NRSROs for purposes of the rating? If you've got one NRSRO that's doing something different than another, so I'm going to put the question back on you, Jason, on that one.
So how we would view that is we would view that any SRO that's out there, and traditionally what we look at is in NRSROs are really the three main ones, which is Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. The others, yes, they are NRSROs, but they do not have as much credence in the market as those three. And how we would do that is we would look at the highest rating. So if it were to have a AA rating, we would say, yes, it's appropriate because the policy calls out for only one rating.
Well, I think the answer to your question is then at least one NRSRO has given it a AA rating.
Yes.
Therefore, we can acquire it under this authorization. And that would be, from my standpoint, that would be okay.
Great.
Okay, how do others feel? Susan?
I don't have our paperwork in front of us from the investment committee, but 25 basis points is a lot right now.
Yes, if you think about it, LAIF is earning today around 20 basis points. So that would be basically, if you had a security that added 25 basis points of that, you would basically double the earnings of that particular security in today's market.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Kevin?
Yeah, Jason, do you have an example, and I know to a certain extent this fluctuates, but do you have an example of a AA rated company that, yeah?
Amazon is
Amazon.
a AA rated company, and let me give you another. Procter & Gamble is a AA rated company. Apple Computer is a AA rated company. And then after that, my memory gets a little bit foggy because there isn't that many of them.
So if we were to talk about a AA rated companies, would that give us more flexibility on what we could invest in and what we couldn't as far as the companies go, as opposed to just a single A?
So the
What would be the difference? Is it a quantum leap or is it just a leap?
the investable universe expands dramatically when you move from AA to single A corporations. Triple, maybe quadruple the number of actual issuers that are available under a single A rating. And remember that happens again when you move down the spectrum. But for public agencies in California, they can only buy securities that are rated A or better.
But that's not to say that single A companies are not good, solid companies. I believe you said John Deere was one of them, and I think I wrote down Pfizer and I think Merck. Those are all single. Will they, at some point, could they get up to a AA? I guess they could, depending upon who's rating them. Is that correct?
I think the best way to think about this is the further you move down the credit scale, so let's just talk about the A kind of scales, AAA, AA, and single A. The further you move down that, the lesser quality their financials are, just in general. Doesn't mean that it's a bad investment. Doesn't mean that it's not going to meet the objectives of safety, liquidity, and yield, but you are moving down that credit spectrum.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so anybody object to moving this to AA? Okay, thank you. Now we go to asset-backed, mortgage-backed, well, number 12.
Number 12, okay. So we're looking to, potentially include asset-backed, mortgage-backed securities and collateralized mortgage obligations into the investment policy to potentially purchase some of these securities. What these securities are, in plain English, is essentially when you look at these securities, there's pools of mortgages, and those mortgages are pooled together. Investors buy a piece of that pool, and then as principal and interest payments are made on those, they are distributed to the investors. So on an asset-backed security, you're typically talking about auto loans, auto financing in some ways, maybe tractors from John Deere, heavy equipment, and then also potentially credit cards from large institutions like JP Morgan, Chase. When you're looking at mortgage-backed securities as far as pass-throughs, typically those are issued through the federal agencies. So that would be Fannie Mae, that would be Freddie Mac. Those are the typical issuers that you would have, and they are collateralized, or the actual pool of securities, those mortgages from them. And remember that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac today are under conservatorship of the United States government, so there are government securities for the most part. And then looking at collateralized mortgage
And we already invest in them, right? Or can?
We can, the senior debentures of those. Right. And then when we have collateralized mortgage obligations, that is the same thing as a mortgage pass-through security, although in this instance, the collateral is still there, and there is some financial engineering that goes on as far as that pool of securities, and they essentially, that collateral is bucketized into different securities depending upon what the risks of those securities are.
How do these mortgage-backed securities differ from REITs, or are they REITs?
So a REIT is something that is different. A REIT is actually an equity, and a REIT is a real estate investment trust. And so real estate investment trusts can take on two forms. One, they can be basically a mortgage holder. In this case, it would be private mortgages, maybe not the mortgages of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And typically, they act like a bank, and they use leverage. And so what they do is they borrow funds to go buy these mortgages. And so when things go south there, they go really south. The other piece of that is there are also REITs, or real estate investment trusts, that buy properties. So some of the hotels and things like that around the area. And then, of course, they have to finance that. And so some of that comes from debt financing and also from equities. But typically when I think of REITs, those are like stocks, and that is not permitted per the California Government Code for public agencies.
So are these, is there less risk in buying these than in buying into REITs?
Yes. Because these are debt obligations. If you have a mortgage and your mortgage is part of one of these pools, you're making that principal and interest payment. And if you stop making that principal and interest payment, there's definitely consequences, and that's to pay off the bondholders.
Any other questions on these? Tony?
Jason, thanks. I'm still trying to make sure I understand the first line of Section 12, and it says, and I quote, asset-backed, mortgage-backed, mortgage pass-through securities, and collateralized mortgage obligations, CMOs, from issuers not defined in Section 2 and Section 5 of the authorized investments section of this policy. Section 2 are U.S. T-notes, bonds, bills, et cetera, and Section 5 is federal agency or U.S. government-sponsored enterprises. So what's the universe, recognizing that there's qualifications on the back end for issuers not defined in 2 and 5? In other words, you'd have to have a rating category of a AA and then particular caps on how much could be invested.
Yes.
What are some examples, again, of, because that's a whole universe of issuers. It could be anybody from XYZ Enterprises to somebody with someone, a lot more recognizable name.
Right. So what we purchase for clients is the agency-backed collateral. So that could be from Ginnie Mae, Fannie Mae. It could be from the agency collateral. There is the opportunity for some to purchase what we would call private label mortgages, to where you could buy mortgages from Bank of America Securities. That would be basically their private labels, but that's not what we purchase for clients.
But that's okay. But that's where I'm going, because there's no distinction here between public versus private entities. So for example, I don't know if Federal Home Loan Bank Board would be a good example, but you could have that as a public example. But what happens when you have B of A or another, or let's say you have a Goldman or a Morgan pooling collateral-backed mortgages? They could qualify this. So as long as they qualified under the standard, our authorized investments would include both public as well as private entities, correct?
Correct. So if you wanted to put a stipulation within your investment policy, what we could say is that you could only buy agency-backed, mortgage-backed, and CMOs. The asset-backed securities, you cannot do that for because those are typically issued, and so I'm going to use a kind of a generic term.
Right.
Because there's some legal things that go on their side because there's a trust that's created. But those are issued by Honda. Those are issued by Toyota, other types of entities. And so we can't put that stipulation there. If it is the objective just to allow for agency MBS and agency CMOs, I would definitely we can change that language within the policy to reflect that, to not allow for what we would call private label structured product.
Right, and so you anticipated where I was going to go with, may I continue? You anticipated where I was going to go with this question. So if there's no private label, it would be only agency-backed.
Right.
Is there a substantial, no, let me reframe this. Well, no, let's go with this question. Is there a substantial difference in earnings between, in your professional opinion, between an agency-backed versus an asset-backed or private label in terms of return on investment?
So let me take a couple of those in a separate categories because I think they're very different. On the ABS side, or the asset-backed security side, where you purchase auto receivables and things like that, they're pretty similar to one another because that collateral is very short-term in nature. And when you're looking at the different types of issuers and what type of collateral that they're putting into there, it definitely is a more structured security, a security that doesn't have very much variability. When you are looking at private label, there's a broader universe. And so that added earnings is pretty substantial, but depending upon what you're buying. Typically, and I will say typically, I would say almost 100% of the time, we are not purchasing under the mortgage-backed side or the CMO side the private label securities.
And
we
that's
have
where I was going.
always purchased the agency collateral, and that's just because our firm in general is conservative.
Okay.
We don't think that is something that public agencies
All right,
want to do.
and you anticipated where I was going, because my suggestion was going to be that we would limit this to the agency-backed and exclude the private label investments from a safety standpoint.
So may I ask, just to clarify something within the statement as you're talking about. So within this particular statement, we would say asset-backed securities because there's the auto receivables and things like that. And then what we would say is agency mortgage-backed pass-throughs and agency CMOs. And that would put that stipulation that it would be collateral from only government organizations.
That would be, well, I'm sorry, that would be my ask on this. And one final question, is there a material difference in terms of investment return on the agency-backed versus the private label?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because I will tell you, it's hard to, for me to boil that down to a number for you.
Right.
Just because the universe is so broad and there's lots of different things that are going on that we don't participate in.
Right.
We are analyzing these. And just to make the council get a little bit more comfortable, we have the systems in place to look at these. We can actually look at these different securities at the loan level to see if they're paying or if they're not paying.
Right.
And so we have the ability to look at this. Where if you looked in the past where some of these things didn't work out, and this was more so in the private label market, there was not as much transparency that there is today.
That said, though, as a typical rule, you're not having your municipal clients invest on the private label side.
Yes, I would say that, and over the last 20 years that I've been at Chandler, We have not purchased a private label security
Okay.
for a public agency portfolio.
All right, thank you.
We are very conservative with the way that we use the tools that are available to us in California Government Code.
So, Madam Mayor, my suggestion would be that we take the amendments that Jason.
So it would say asset-backed, agency mortgage-backed mortgages, pass-through securities, and agency collateralized mortgage obligations.
That's correct, and I think that would make it clearer, and that would give substance to what you just mentioned, because that's where I was ultimately going.
All right?
And we have, I think, 4 agreements on that.
Those are my only,
5. Okay?
those are my only questions.
Next change is M.
So M, we discussed with the committee, and so there are investment pools, the local agency investment fund, other types of investment pools that the city may purchase. What this is really showing is that the city staff will do an investigation of these particular investments on an ongoing basis. And so why is that? Well, you own this pool, but wouldn't you like to know what's in the pool? What are the characteristics of some of those securities that are within the pool? Things like that. So that's what this is for. This is a safety measure or a risk mitigation measure, so that staff will look at the different pools that it potentially is going to place the money of the city in and ensure that that meets the qualifications or the criteria that is out there for that. So this is a safety mitigation measure.
I would be more comfortable with this if it said the last sentence you said, but it doesn't. It just says they're going to develop, do an investigation. It doesn't say what they're going to do after they've done the investigation. So I would be more comfortable if this up here said, and use that in a determination of whether they will invest in it or not.
Okay. I think that that's appropriate to place that. And just to kind of wrap this up into plain language, it's about know what you own at the end of the day. You want to know what you're owning. And so that's what this is really trying to.
And sometimes we don't like what Leif does. Does anybody else have any questions or recommendations on this? Okay.
I think those were the key changes that we were going to point out. The rest of the changes are the descriptions in the glossary of terms that relate to these changes. So rather than go through each of those changes, we'll maybe just ask to see if there are any questions on the rest of the proposed changes in the document.
Does anybody have any questions on the rest? And go through and take a good look. And okay.
I don't have any.
Okay. We've made a lot of changes. When is the deadline for having to have this passed?
I believe in the policy it says by September that we at least review it, bring it back to both the
Council.
Investment Committee and the City Council, and we've done that. I just.
We've made a lot of changes. I'm just asking, do we all need this to come back in the final form as we've changed it tonight? Or are we okay with just saying, making a determination tonight?
I would be okay with making a determination tonight as long as we incorporate into this recommended policy changes the language that the revisions that we've asked for tonight.
I agree.
I agree.
I don't want the committee's done a lot of really good work.
Okay.
And thank you, Jason, as well. I don't want to send it back to committee when we don't need to.
Okay, very good. Well, I wasn't even looking at going to committee. I was just asking, do we want the changed wording to come back to us? So if everybody's okay with it, we need a motion.
I'll move.
You make the motion with the changes we discussed?
Yes, with the changes that we've agreed to.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion? Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. I know we're past 6, but we have somebody in the audience waiting for the next item, and I think this won't take long. Can we go ahead with it? Okay, could we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. In 2018, voters passed Proposition 68, creating the Parks, Environment, and Water Bond Act of 2018, which makes per capita grant funds available under the per capita program and urban county per capita program, which is managed by the California Department of Parks and Recreation. These grants are non-competitive funds and are made available to agencies for local park rehab, creation, and improvements for recreational purposes. The City of Camarillo's allocation is $220,000, $220,661. There are several requirements for eligible projects. Projects must be capital outlay for recreational purposes, either acquisition or development. No replacing of designated funds. For example, if the City Council has identified and approved a project and has identified funding, these funds cannot be swapped with per capita funding. Projects that do not serve severely disadvantaged communities must include a 20% match for the grantee. And the grant application deadline is December 31st, 2021, with a project completion date of March 31. These are the most notable requirements. There are other requirements, but these were the most notable that staff was looking into as we were seeking eligible projects. We reviewed the CIP project list and other possibilities throughout the city. And with the goal of keeping per capita funds here in the Camarillo community, and with staff not being able to identify projects that would meet that criteria that I just mentioned, we reached out to the Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District and to see if they would have some eligible projects. General Manager Mary Otten, who is here tonight to answer any project-specific questions, provided information for 2 eligible projects that meet all eligibility requirements. That's Arneal Ranch Park renovation, Phase 1 or Phase 2, and Freedom Park Pickleball Complex. There's a very brief description in your agenda report on that. The state allows for transfer of funds as long as the City Council adopts a resolution receiving the funds and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement. And it also requires that the council adopt a second resolution transferring the funds to the district. Now, there are other documents and contracts that need to be executed by both the city manager and also by the Pleasant Valley, by the district, for them to pursue those funds. So tonight, it's recommended that the City Council adopt the required resolutions as listed in the agenda report.
Any questions? Kevin?
Yeah, so my understanding, if I'm reading this correctly, that the Pleasant Valley Recreation Park District, I believe, have 2 potential sources where they could use these funds. I think the funds are somewhere around, what is it, $220,000, something like that. If in fact these funds are granted, will they spend that money on one of the 2? Will they split it up and spend it on both of them? Or how would they go about spending that money if in fact it is granted?
I would ask our general manager to come over and speak to that.
Make sure. All right. Good evening, council members. Mary Otten, General Manager, Pleasant Valley Recreation Park District. So we've identified 2 projects that are eligible for this that are eligible and we're actually currently working on right now. So what will end up happening after, if the council chooses to dedicate these funds or transfer them over to us, then before our board at the October board meeting, then what we would do is the board would have to decide which project. And so part of the decision-making process will be when we think these projects can come to fruition, because it's not just about when we get the funds. As was stated, the project has to be completed by March of 2024. So we need to make sure that those all align. So as looking at project dates right now, Arneal Ranch is already in motion. So that is one project that's already in motion. Going before our board here next week is the initial RFP for the architectural design for the pickleball project at Freedom. So we're still scoping that project out. So that's why we'll take this in October, so it gives us time to evaluate to make sure that we can spend the money accordingly.
But you're confident if the funds are awarded that you'll find a home for them, if you will?
Yeah, right now with Arneal Ranch, there's already dedicated, the project right now is $1.4 million. So
How much is it again?
1.4 for
Thank you.
Phase 1. So we could dedicate both city funds that you transfer and our funds, which is about 222,000. So even if we dedicated all of those funds, we'd be within the scope of the grant. So that would mean that $400,000 could go to that project. As we know that right now it's slated, pickleball is about 1.4 million as well. And that's that's initial concept. So depending on where construction goes, we all know where that's been the last 6-8 months.
Yeah.
So that could go up exponentially.
True.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Yeah.
There's a motion? Oh, yes.
Did Tony move it?
Tony moved it.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, it is now 6:25. I will recess this back into closed session. Or are we going to do the CAMSAN closed session first?
Oh, we've got the option of
Okay.
doing either one.
I will recess back into closed session, and we will be back here at 7 o'clock for the rest of our business. council members are present. Next item is public comments on items not on the agenda. So I'll take these in the order that they were given to me. If anybody else in the audience would like to speak to us, please fill out a blue card that's at the back and hand it to the city clerk, and there's a little box there you can put it in. The first card I have is from Harold. I believe it's Wasserman, but I might be pronouncing the name wrong. I apologize. And just pull the microphone right down to your mouth so that we can hear you. Sometimes it's more difficult through the mask. Speak very clearly. You have 3 minutes. You can see a clock up here. I see one back there. It will start counting down as soon as you start talking. When it gets to 1 minute remaining, it will turn a different color, and there'll be a yellow buzzer and a yellow tone and a buzzer. And then when it gets to, when your time is up, when your 3 minutes are completed, it will turn red. There'll be a red signal, and there'll be another buzzer, and then I will cut everybody off at that because it's not fair to let some people keep going and other people respect the time. So with that, it's your turn.
Thank you. Actually, I'm calling because I had an experience with your water department that was fabulous. I had a leak, which is just what we need during this drought, and I called the water department, and nobody answered, but I left a message, and somebody got back to me within, I would guess, 20 minutes. Her name was Lydia, and she was intelligent, polite, and very efficient. She said she would put in a work order and get somebody to my house late that day or early the next day. Richard from the water department showed up. He checked it. He said, yep, you got a leak. It's in the meter. And he turned the water off, fixed the leak, and was out of there in 20 minutes. And for all the complaining people do about the city employees not working, these two guys, they're like the city clerk. I mean, they're really efficient, good, polite. It's all anybody could ask for. And I don't have anything else to say for the last minute and 44 seconds.
Thank you very much. We love to hear compliments.
I did, one more thing. Susan, say hi to your parents for Hal and Jan. Thank you.
Next, I have 2 speakers on 1 card. I'm not sure how they're going to do this. Arlene Miro and Jay Evans.
Good evening. Both Jay and I are here representing the Camarillo Council on Aging. We're here to talk about our event that we had, the shredding event that we had on August 14th. We normally have a shredding event once or twice a year. We didn't have it last year, so we had it this August. Do you believe we had over 600 cars attend in a 4-hour period? We made about $200. There were donations that were given as people came in for the shredding to occur. What do we use all that money for, you ask? We use it as part of our resource guide money to help us develop our resource guide. And we also work with the Amber Light and the Healthcare District to develop Christmas bags that we purchase items for, and then that goes to senior citizens who are homebound. Now, I talked about this. Jay's going to talk about the volunteers that you need.
Hi, I'm Jay Evans, and the volunteers supported this event. In addition to the 6 board members and 2 of our spouses, there were 22 volunteers from groups that included Amber Light Lions Club, Adolfo Camarillo High School, CERT members from the city, volunteers, and California Conservation Corps. Access Information Management provided the staff and equipment to set up the traffic flow and accept materials for shredding. We especially want to thank Jeffrey Madden for coordinating the event, helping recruit volunteers, making sure that the event ran smoothly, and the pizza lunch for all volunteers and Access employees. And the Council on Aging looks forward to its next community shred event in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next card I have is from Brian Morris.
Hello, honorable members of the Camarillo City Council. It's nice seeing you again. My name is Brian Morris. I'm a homeowner in Camarillo Springs and the founder of OpposeCamarillospringsBuilding.com. Our organization of 652 registered members opposed the construction of 248 homes and the resulting closure of the 18-hole golf course by New Urban West. We are not anti-golf, quite to the contrary. We support retaining the 18-hole golf course in Camarillo Springs. As you are well aware, the self-appointed Camarillo Springs Advisory Committee, sometimes called Preserve Camarillo Springs Golf, is an offshoot and agent of the New Urban West Housing Development Company and delivers the New Urban West public relations and sales efforts to the public. For weeks, we've had exposure mailers from the New Urban West, such as this one, stuffed our mailboxes, which solely blame the Camarillo Springs City Council for delaying the approval of the New Urban West proposed housing and construction. They further asked that each mailer recipient contact the City Council and object to your delays and to approve demolition of the largest recreational space in Camarillo, the golf course, and to approve the construction of the 248 homes on a floodplain, which before the EIR study, and before the EIR study is even completed. They admit the council can't vote without a final EIR or the environmental impact report, but fail to admit the delay is of their own doing by failing to supply the missing reports and documentation they are charged to supply to you. It's a classic, the pot calling the kettle black. Oppose is well aware of the dubious New Urban West flood control plan, which has not been approved. The slipshod capping of over 80 ancient and eroding underground oil wells, the mismanagement of crude oil seepage from below, which has knowingly killed countless wildlife, the missing plans for the promised but still vague replacement 12-hole golf course, and the many other issues awaiting their hopeful mitigation. We are here tonight to thank you. Thank you for resisting the pressure from New Urban West and their millions of dollars. Thank you for steadfastly concerning yourselves with all the facts and the best interests of the city of Camarillo. And again, thank you.
Thank you. Next card is from Betsy Artuso.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Betsy. I thank God every day that I live in the flat part of Camarillo and am able, with some effort, to get to stores, the bank, the city hall on my own. However, when the weather is not conducive to wheeling around outside, I do rely on our public transportation system. I should never have to think twice about the affordability of our public transportation, nor should anyone have to think twice about being able to afford our public transit. That's why I'm here again to ask this council to readdress the price increase to the Camarillo Area Transit's monthly bus pass and, excuse me, and to place this item back onto the agenda so that we can reevaluate a much-needed and moderate price increase, a 220% price increase placed on folks who are least able to take the hit of that increase. I don't think it sits well with any one of the council members. I believe in the City of Camarillo residents and the City Council and our ability to achieve great things such as healing our earth by promoting public transportation and reducing the number of cars on the road and beating COVID-19, because when you have a bus pass, nothing changes hands. And to do this, I believe that all it takes is an affordable bus pass and one that is reasonably increased so that it is good for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card is from Nancy Lindholm.
Good evening, Mayor Craven and members of the City Council. My name's Nancy Lindholm, and I am the President and CEO of the West Ventura County Business Alliance, which is now the Chamber of Commerce serving the communities of Camarillo and Oxnard. Some of you may remember me. I served as chair of the Camarillo Chamber of Commerce 20 years ago today, actually. And it was Councilmember Tony Tremblay that recruited me onto that board of directors, as a matter of fact. I also had the pleasure of living in the city of Camarillo for more than 10 years. For the last 17 years, I have served as the president and CEO of the Oxnard Chamber of Commerce, so I'm certainly familiar with the industry. I'm very excited about the new partnership between the two business communities, which will allow us to expand benefits to our members and have a strong, united voice for business. And now I get to spend more time in Camarillo as well. So I just wanted to stop by and introduce myself to those of you I haven't met before, both city staff and council members. And I will leave some business cards over here. Feel free to contact me with any issues that may come up or anything I can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card is from Richard Figueroa Barajas.
Good evening. This is my sixth time coming here. I was here 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, the doors were locked, and we weren't able to speak. But and I happened to use 2 of my bus passes. Wasted them, you could say, but that's how important this is to me. I was handed by Betsy Artuzo and the gentleman from the Acorn cards and checks from people of the community who are trying to help me. And although this may help me in my own personal issue and situation, I'm not here for just me. I'm here for Betsy and all of those others that are unwilling or unable to come and speak to you. to show that how much this is affecting their lives. I personally don't look for sympathy, but I do ask for empathy from you to reconsider the rate hike, to analyze a reasonable and workable rate increase. And, once again, I spoke with Tyler, or I didn't speak with him, I communicated with him today via email. And, he passed along a lot of valuable information, but didn't want to speak about the issue itself. Anyhow, I don't know how many times it's going to take just to reconsider or to hear us. Once again, you have the privilege of not having to answer any of our questions. I think you probably believe by now that had we known about the hearing for the rate increase, I know two of us would have been here for sure. But once again, I'm not just here for myself, but for everybody who's non-ADA, who doesn't have the opportunity or privilege to use some of the other resources that are out there from the county. And trust me, I would change, I would hand over my ADA status and my 100% disability and be able to fly again. I'd be over there in Afghanistan right now, pulling out those people, but I can't. So I'm just trying to get around the best I can, as others want to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Spencer Ritchie is the next card.
Hi, Camarillo City Council. You are very lucky that I have, one, become much busier in the past few weeks, and I, two, don't have infinite energy reserves, quite the opposite. And two, you should also consider yourselves very lucky that the fact that you raised bus prices an average of 220% without providing any sort of affordability aid is slowly catching on in newspapers such as the Ventura County Star and elsewhere, because all three of those factors have helped me decide to put off personally starting or running some sort of picketing until you actually do something to at least address it. And hopefully it will not take picketing for you to realize that there are a lot of people in Camarillo who struggle to afford even like the old prices. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are struggling to afford those. And now, well, because you raised the price of a monthly bus pass more than 3 times for ADA and seniors, I'm sure there's at least 3 times as many people who are struggling to cover their bus expenses and thus their daily activities of life. I have also been collecting signatures for my petition. I've been posting the petition over and over on Nextdoor and on Facebook. And my social coach and I, and also I myself, have been going to a few plazas, only a few so far. It's just a minority of the plazas in Camarillo. Plus, I have sat outside of the Camarillo Public Library. So far I've spent one Saturday doing that. And so far we have collected, 127 signatures. That is 127 different people who agree that you raising the bus prices an average of 220% is all at once with no sort of aid whatsoever is very illogical, and it's unpopular, and I am not even done collecting signatures.
Thank you. The next card is from Ted Kopaz. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it.
My name's Ted Kupal. I've been a resident of the Camarillo since 2005. I'm also a past president of the Camarillo Springs HOA. My theme tonight is don't bet against Mother Nature again because we'll all lose again. About a half a century ago, another city council bet against Mother Nature when they approved the original Camarillo Springs development. Some 40 years later, in December of 14, Mother Nature repeated a frequent occurrence from the mountain above our senior community. People ask, why did it happen? It never happened before. Wrong. Detailed studies by geologists and engineers proved that there had been thousands of floods and hundreds of rock slides down into the valley and the floodplain below during the past 10,000 years. 40 years is only a blip in geological time. Unfortunately, your forefathers on City Council approved a developer to build a senior community in that floodplain. We all remember the results. Fortunately, that time nobody was killed, but hundreds of thousands of dollars was done in the community and the floodplain below. And the city finally paid millions in construction costs to maintain a mountain they don't own in an attempt to prevent another disaster. Now another outside developer is trying to convince you good folks to repeat the sins of your fathers by taking away our natural floodplain and building more senior homes over an abandoned oil wells drilled shortly after the turn of the century, which are under the proposed development site. They plan to use flap gates buried in unmanned underground tunnels to mitigate the flow of waters, which we know will flow down from the mountain again. Who's going to maintain those buried, unreliable flap gates? Why build homes over an abandoned oil field with potentially many uncapped wells? If you interview the 1,500 or so residents behind our gates, you will find a very small minority are in favor of this new development. But they support it out of fear that the current owner, if denied, will do what he has done in the past, which was to fence the course and spread tons of chicken manure over the abandoned course to fertilize the land. He then paid $10,000 fine and is alleged to have laughed about it as only being a small cost of doing business. We don't need another senior development in Camarillo due to migration from California, where we actually lost population over the last census for the first time since its founding. Please do not make the same mistake your forefathers made half a century ago. Why let an out-of-town investor build homes in a floodplain and endanger your senior citizens? The man bought property he owned for a golf course in a floodplain without doing proper research before he acquired it. That should not be your problem. It's his problem. Thank you very much for your time and for your past support.
Thank you. The next card is from Lorena Sarawatari. Lorena, you'll have to have your mask up. There you go, thanks.
Good evening. On Monday, August 23rd, 2021, the people of the United States, Camarillo, Ventura County, yourselves, were informed that the Food and Drug Administration had given the full license to the Pfizer injection. The media, along with our president and other government figures, deceitfully propagated this lie to the people. The Food and Drug Administration did not give approval to the license to the Pfizer injection. They only clarified that the emergency use authorization will remain in place for the Pfizer biotech COVID-19 vaccine mRNA under the EUA for certain uses that are not included in the BLA. You can find that in the Food and Administration website, and I have the document, and I'm mailing it to you via certified mail, so you can check it yourself. You can find that in page 2 in the second paragraph. As you continue to read the document, you will find more proof that the injection did not get fully licensed, but remain for emergency use authorization of the Pfizer vaccine shot, I will call it, okay? So it says, even in the carton level, clearly state and mark emergency use authorization only. Page 7, paragraph, third paragraph. Under the heading, conditions related to private matter advertising and promoted, it says, this product has not been approved or licensed by the FDA, but has been authorized for emergency use only by the FDA. So, and that is on page 12, section Y, bullet point, the first bullet point. And now if you go to the end of page 13, it says, the emergency authorization, use authorization will be effective only during the declaration of a pandemic. Now, how many of you have gone during the emergency, it says right, how many of you have gone to the hospital for an emergency, for an appendicitis or a broken leg and stayed there for 17 months? This emergency was done on May of 2020. We're right now on August 2021. So please, I ask that you do not demand of your employees and the city and the school and the policemen and the fire department, firemen, to take a vaccine that is not a vaccine, it's an injection that has not been proved. And the end of the trial ends on May
Thank you,
2nd,
Lorena.
2023.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Craven. Thank you so much for serving for 12 years. I will miss you. Thank you for all your magnificent work.
You're welcome. The next item is a public hearing. User fee schedule update. So I'll wait for everybody to get it on their new computers. Everybody got it? Okay. Could we have the staff report, please?
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. This is an item to conduct a public hearing to consider updated user fees for the city. It'll be following the public hearing, the recommendation to adopt a resolution to update the user fees. The city's existing user fees were adopted on December 11, 2019, and that was following a comprehensive fee study that determined the actual costs of providing the city services. The city cannot charge more than the actual cost to provide the service, and pursuant to City Council Policy 3.01, that's the budget and fiscal policy, most of the fees have been set at 100% cost recovery. Per that same policy, the user fees will be reviewed and updated annually to ensure that they keep pace with the cost of providing the service. The policy states that user fees will be calculated annually to reflect an adjustment for any year-over-year change in labor costs. This is the first update since the fees were adopted in December 2019, and the labor cost increase since that date is 5.64%. So all of the fees in the schedule attached to the resolution have been adjusted by 5.64%, with the exception of those few fees that have maximums that were set by the state. So that concludes the brief report, and I will be available for any questions.
Are there any questions? Kevin?
Yeah, Mark, so let me just get the timeline. So per se, we didn't really adjust the fees last FYI, but we're doing it this year. So we're more looking at a 16th to 18th month lag, if you will, from the last time that we looked at the fee adjustment potential.
Correct.
And for the most part, we use that CUP as a percentage on how we're going to I believe you said it was 5.64%. Did I hear that right?
Right, 5.64%, and that is actually per the policy. The policy is written to adjust the fees based on the actual labor costs.
Labor costs.
Right.
And that was the labor cost for the last 16 to 18 months, or was that the labor cost for the last 12 months?
For about the 18-month period.
18 months.
Since we've adopted the fees in December 2019.
Okay. And is that the LA region that we use, or with the labor cost, or what, do you know what region?
We're talking about the actual labor costs of city staff that are performing
Okay.
the services. So it's a
Okay.
little bit different measurement. The CPI is a more general measurement.
Mhm.
This one is the actual cost that's incurred to perform the services.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's all I have.
Sean?
Understanding that we're trying to achieve 100% cost recovery ratio, and the average city labor rate has increased to 5.64% since we last set this. The only other way to try to mitigate price increases would be to effectively find better ways of conducting these processes. So to that extent, what is the city and the staff undertaking, or what have we undertaken in order to try to streamline, simplify, and or just simply make more efficient these processes, so that way we can effectively try to not pass as significant of a price increase moving forward?
I think the answer to the question on the significant price increase on an annual basis is that's based on labor rates. So that is the annual increases in personnel costs.
Understood.
We update the fees on a 5-year basis. That means doing a complete study where we're looking at the time estimates to complete a task that's been requested by someone from the public, a city service. So in between that 5-year period, this annual inflation adjustment, if you will, has been built in to keep pace with those costs. So I would say the departments and staff are working to be more efficient in how we conduct business. That impact would be reflected with the next fee study, full-blown comprehensive fee study update, where we look at the costs or the time necessary to complete a task or a request. And that's the schedule that we're on right now.
Is there a potential for a discretionary action if staff feels that they have somehow significantly changed some sort of significant process? I don't know all the. I know there's obviously there's a litany of fees here, and they each have their own respective process. But as staff looks at making improvements and or gains efficiencies, can they not kind of use discretion in that and say, we made major headway here, we don't need to necessarily just automatically price in this average labor cost
Yes,
increase?
There is that opportunity in the interim period prior to doing a full-blown study.
And staff would be open, I presume, to, if they feel that's significant enough, to bring that forward?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Susan?
I just want to clarify. So at certain periods, we do a study, and I recall I was here when we did that. And that study is an actual time study. It's looking at the actual time. And that creates the fee schedule. What we're doing now is just adjusting for the increase in labor.
Correct.
So, okay.
Okay, no other questions? I will open the public hearing. I have no cards. Does the city clerk have cards? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to us on this item? Seeing no one come forward, I will close the public hearing and turn it over to the council.
Madam Mayor, I'll move the suggested form of resolution.
I'll second.
The motion and a second. Further discussion? Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. Now we go back to item 5, proposed formation of a library ad hoc committee. So I'll wait till everybody gets to item 5.
I think you mean item V, right?
item B. I don't know, I'm on the wrong agenda, I apologize. I'm on the printed agenda, which has different numbering.
Yeah. Well, it's right after item U, so I think it's item V. It looks, I mean, if it were Roman numerals, it would be 5.
Yeah. V as in victory.
Oh, okay. I got it. Okay. At any rate, let's discuss the formation of an ad hoc committee for the library.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is everybody there on your?
Yeah.
Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes. In October, it will be 11 years that the City Council took over the operation and control of the Camarillo Library. And since January 2011, LS&S has been providing management services and operating the library for the city. Excuse me. So back in June of this past June, the contract was set to expire. However, due to the challenges and the service impacts due to COVID, the City Council agreed to extend that agreement with LS&S for 1 additional year, which will expire June 30th, 2022. So as we head into negotiating a future contract, staff is requesting City Council's consideration to appoint an ad hoc committee to provide staff with input on several aspects of library operations and services. In the agenda report, it did provide a list of, and that's a summarized list, but a summarized list of different aspects of what we will be discussing, we would be discussing with the ad hoc committee. So, but in summary, there is a lot to review in terms of the operation and the services, and also in reviewing the current contract and current provisions. We want to provide a good update to the City Council, and we also want to be able to clean up the current agreement as we move forward. So there is a lot of work to do, including reviewing corresponding policies and bringing those recommendations to the City Council. So tonight, staff is requesting your discussion regarding the formation of an ad hoc committee. And should the City Council direct the formation, then an agenda report will be prepared for the City Council on the next regular meeting. Also, pursuant to the City Council Policy 1.01, the mayor is authorized to appoint up to 2 members of the City Council to the ad hoc committee with the concurrence of the City Council. And again, that would be brought to you at the next regular meeting, should the council direct a formation. Thank you.
Any questions?
I think it's needed. That's all.
Okay. It is time to renegotiate the contract, that's for sure. Okay, then we will bring that back at the next meeting.
Thank you. We'll work on that.
Next is an unnumbered and unlettered item, oral communications. Can't get this one wrong. Susan.
Okay, for meetings attended, August 18th, CPA Executive Committee, August 24th, the Investment Committee, and August 5th, there was a special board meeting for CPA. And then I just have 2 quick things. I want to remind everybody to vote, and that there is that ballot box here at City Hall. I think you do have until September 14th to put that ballot in. And it's been a while since I brought up COVID, but I'm just going to bring it up again and ask people to be careful and wear their masks and wash their hands and do all those things that we've been doing for so long and that we're so sick of doing. I mean, it was hard to come back in here and know that we had to put our masks back on. But the Delta variant is real, and it's hard. This has really been hard. It's a long time. We're all tired. We're all sick of this. But we still have to be careful. And so I'm just asking everybody to follow those guidelines and be patient and keep doing the right things so that we can get through this. And that's all I have.
And to get vaccinated.
And get vaccinated, yes. I will be getting my booster, my third, hopefully as soon as possible, but please get vaccinated.
Sean?
Nope, already on. I'll be relatively brief. August 9th, CCCI Site Authority meeting. I got one request of my colleagues. Certainly has to do with public transportation. It is not, though, necessarily doesn't have to do with the rate increase. On that vote, it's come to my attention through some complaints that I've received that there were also some additional unintended consequences of that decision, and it particularly relates to raising the senior and ADA age from the 55 to 65. Unbeknownst to me, when you are in that category, senior and ADA, you will get picked up and dropped off at your residence or wherever you're going for just slightly outside city boundaries, i.e. the Heights, Las Postas Estates, pretty much areas that are within the city's sphere of influence, that just neighborhoods adjacent to the city line. In our case, all those are uphill. By taking that action, we've pushed a lot of people, or several people, out of that classification. And so now they are being dropped off at city line or being picked up at city line and hiking up and or down the respective hill. In some cases, this is Valley Vista. And I don't even like riding my bike up Valley Vista, let alone walking it, or it's in the Heights, which presents an issue. I don't like the concept of anyone having to walk, particularly up or downhill, in order to get to the respective public transportation if they're city line adjacent. So I would like to change that policy. We had it before. I can understand the justification having to amend prices in order to meet certain ratios, fare box recovery ratios, in order to protect our funding for public transportation. But making people have to walk now, get out of their house and walk either up or down a hill in order to meet their CAT vehicle is kind of a bridge too far for me. I don't think that's representative of what we want to have people having to do. Even if you are able-bodied, I know plenty of 55, 60-year-olds, 64-year-olds who that's still a trek for them. So I would like to look at amending that so that way, at least, and I'm really just talking about Camarillo, the Heights, which is, a few blocks, and Las Postas Estates. I can't really think of anything else that's really outside of city boundaries that's like kind of city line adjacent, aside from there's maybe a few neighborhoods really close to the city line off Santa Rosa that would really be applicable, nor would that really increase costs in any real significant, noticeable way. So I think, at least for me, I can say that was a blind spot. Didn't understand that was going to be a ramification of that vote. I didn't understand that was actually a policy that fell on the line of whether you were ADA senior or not.
And that's only for ADA seniors, not all seniors.
Correct.
Because I believe, Mr. Klotzel can correct me, but I believe our contract with the county is only for ADA seniors that are out of the city and only in specified areas. We have a contract with the county about this. Because these people are not our residents. We don't just serve them to be nice. Otherwise, we'd be serving everybody up there.
Right, that's correct. The relationship with the county that you refer to, we do receive some funding from the county portion of transit funding, and specifically for ADA. Our administration and operation of our transit system has extended, rather than make the distinction between ADA and senior, we've provided that same service to senior and ADA. Just by way of simply applying that same service. Often the rider is both ADA and senior. There are the cases where they're senior only, but that has been applied to both cases, senior only and or.
Is that what the county contract says?
I don't have I don't know what the exact wording is on that, but what we do comply with that contract in that it's specifically for ADA.
But we extended to seniors.
Correct. In that I think past practice has been based on the relatively low number of riders that applies to. We've gone ahead and applied it to both seniors and
And they have to go ahead and get qualified before we do that.
for ADA,
For-
yes.
Yes, we don't just pick them up because they call.
No, there's qualification, certification process for ADA that's verified before that ride's given as an ADA. Senior age is taken verbally, and if there is it's a driver discretion to verify age if it appears that it's, in question.
So my dilemma still stands. I'd like to try to figure out a path forward to amend that.
I would support looking into this. I mean, I guess I want some information. Is this really happening? So somebody requests a dial-a-ride and they're told, well, I can pick you up at this corner and,
I can pick you up at city boundary line if you're living in the Heights or Estates, or if you're trying to get there for whatever reason. I don't know whether you're working up there, whether you're trying to visit family up there, whether you're a babysitter who wants to go babysit some kids up there. I don't know. It's not my business as to what they're trying to do. But they get dropped off at city line and have to effectively hike
Yeah,
the
but
rest
let
of
me
the way.
ask Mr. Klotzel, if you're ADA approved and in the contract area with the county, we would pick you up no matter what your age
Correct.
in the county or at your home.
Correct.
So this is people who are seniors who are not ADA,
Correct.
that we're extending a courtesy for, that we don't extend to other people, and we don't have a contract for.
Correct. We're extending the courtesy to seniors who were, by definition, 55 and over, which we have now changed the definition to 65 and over.
Okay.
The issue is, my understanding is that we were changing the price, not the quality of the service. To have the price go up and the quality of service for albeit probably a select few. I'm not sure how many it actually impacts. I know there's 2 at least that I've spoken to. That's us diverging in 2 the opposite ways. We're having the costs go up while the quality of service you were being provided go down.
Tony?
John, I want to be clear on one thing. I'm not understanding one thing. Are you talking about reversing the decision to go from 55 to 65, or is it more narrow than that in terms of the service applied in the specific circumstance you're allowed?
It's the service provided.
Where you're going.
It's the quality of service being provided.
So it's not a reversal of the decision relative
No.
to the age
Correct.
that you're seeking? Okay, thanks.
I didn't understand that. No, I hadn't understood that from your discussion. I thought you wanted us to reverse the 55 to 65.
If I could interject, I think I understand what Vice Mayor Moshe is saying, that consider reducing the senior age for folks within the county outside of city limits with regards to ability to ride outside of the city, not impacting the fare.
What I'm trying, the whole fare thing aside.
It's a totally different issue.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to ensure that we maintain the level of service that these people had. They're paying, at least if you're 55 to 64, now you're going to pay $1 more or so, per ride. The idea is, I don't want these people having to walk up or down hill, either several blocks, or if you're in the Estates, I'm not sure, where it depends on where you live. The whole thing is winding hills. Making sure that we're providing them proper service, same service that they were already afforded originally.
Right, it's an eligibility issue. Who's eligible to
to receive ridership in the county outside of the city limits.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a,
But in those neighborhoods, and I'm not talking about just outside of, yeah.
it has to be we can't draw.
I understand there's a line.
Yeah.
There's an invisible line. But we have several neighborhoods, for all intents and purposes, those people are Camarilloans. You know, they live in Camarillo. I understand by legal definition, they don't.
Right.
They live in the county.
That's right.
But they've for 20-plus years, they have an expectation of a certain level of service, and now we've lessened that.
Right, and so you would have to, short of gerrymandering a new line, you would need to apply it equally to all of the county area outside of the city limits to some degree. You'd have to draw some new geographical boundary from an eligibility standpoint, so from a functional standpoint, we could implement the age issue. Does that make sense?
So I can, yes and no. I disagree with it on moral grounds. I feel that there's probably got to be a way. So, no, I don't necessarily accept the answer of, well, if we include a few neighborhoods that are adjacent to Camarillo, that are all intents and purposes Camarillo. But by doing that, we have to include all of unincorporated Ventura County. I don't necessarily accept that.
Right, I don't think it's all of Ventura County, but we can't run a
Unincorporated
program
Ventura County.
with just an area, just say a couple neighborhoods outside of the city limit. We can't, because at some point we have to tell somebody no or yes. So we would just need clarity on exactly who is eligible if we're going to adjust the rate, if that makes sense. So right now, the new age is 65, but that's not limited to some certain number of residents or whatever just outside of the city limit. It applies to, for example, everybody north of our city limits equally, over 65. We don't, right now, kind of limit it to certain homes within the city limit.
So my suggestion is that if there's going to be some further discussion on this topic, that we put on a future agenda item.
I think we should, and I think we should also, at that meeting, have part of it considering amending our contract with the county to see if the county's interested in paying for these people.
I'd like to look into it, regardless. I don't know the ins and the outs, but I'd be interested at least.
So
to learn
under the
about it.
policy we just adopted, you will prepare the agenda report with limited.
Oh, with limited staff.
Limited assistance from staff,
All
right? And you'll work with the city manager on when to do that.
Cool, I'll get to be the guinea pig.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Tony?
Okay, meetings attended since July 28th. July 30, Policy Committee with Mrs. Craven and a VCTC Administration Finance Committee. August 10, again, a VCT Administration Finance Committee. August 10 to 13, the CASA Conference in San Diego, which we've already talked about tonight. August 16, another VCTC Administrative Finance Committee. You note a pattern, of course. We're in the middle, or we're just starting a recruitment for a new executive director for VCTC because Darren Kettle is going to Metrolink. August 17, we had the School Crossing Guard breakfast. August 18th, the Agenda Management Training here at City Hall. August 20, a VCTC board meeting. And today, a Fox Canyon GMA board meeting. Couple of things. I would like to know back to the transit item, not relative to the adjustment of rates, but my understanding is that there may be some sort of fare assistance that is available under existing programs, and I'd like to know what those are. I'm not asking, I'm hoping that as part of this agenda item, and I'd be happy to work with Mr. Mulchay on a limited item, but our staff may already have this information, but I think it's something that we should be publicizing. We probably already have that information in hand. But I do understand from folks who are on the Camarillo Council of Aging and others that there is some assistance available, and I think we need to publicize that.
Yes.
Go ahead, and then I'll...
Plan on bringing an item to the city council in just with that information is being able to provide to the city council and the community, after having done some research, what is available out there already in subsidies. So that will be coming to you either the first meeting or the second meeting in September. We're working on our calendar, but that will be coming. What we have been doing is reaching out to members of the community that have come to council meetings concerned with the fare increases, and we are communicating with them this information.
Three more things. First of all, on Camarillo Springs Golf Course, I know we had some speakers here this evening, but I think we all received an email regarding the existing condition of the course.
2 emails. I found one in my,
Oh, then I skipped over one.
I found one in my, my bulk email today.
Oh, okay, all right. But, the one I'm referring to is from, I think, the senior men's club.
The other one was from a woman.
Right, and it speaks to the course condition, and I'm thinking that we are going to have to, since this project is still pending in terms of review, I think we're going to have to revisit that discussion relative to course condition. And so I wanted to put that on staff's radar screen.
I've been told they're checking on it.
Okay. Thirdly, just wanted to check with staff. When do you anticipate the Las Posas Speed Zone Survey report is coming back to council? Just kind of an ETA on that? Do we have an ETA on that? Well, I'm not hearing an ETA, so at this point.
No, Greg's been-
Oh, sorry.
We were in the process of incorporating that into our kind of comprehensive street safety plan. Now, if there's a separate presentation the council would like on that specific issue, and that data, we could provide that, but we were currently incorporating that information into our overall master plan, our road safety master plan, if that.
Then I would just ask, I'm not going to ask for it to be broken out separately. As part of the road master plan is just fine. Thank you. I don't want to cause additional work. Final thing is on the air show. I was actually present working a volunteer booth at the air show, and I did get some emails. I got some emails from some folks who were discomfited by the noise of the jets, and I get that part. But I also received some emails from some folks who were concerned about the impact on the animals in the shelter, at the animal shelter, and particularly from the noisier jets. And my understanding is that the nonprofit, Wings Over Camarillo, did work with Ventura County Animal Services on this issue. So I guess what I would ask is my colleagues who sit on the Airport Authority, if you could inquire if you could ask for a report on that, on what was done to work between the nonprofit and VCAS on that, I'd really appreciate knowing.
It's Kevin. You're on Animal Services, right?
Actually, I was. I believe Susan is now.
Oh, are you on Animals? Ah,
I think Susan is, yeah.
I will add that I am still part of the volunteer, because I was a foster family, and there were actually multiple posts on the Facebook group for people to come and take dogs out of the shelter for the day on Sunday, because Saturday was so bad for them. So
I'm just curious to know what efforts were being made. That's all.
Yeah.
Just
ahead of time.
I don't know if it was more noise than expected or a different group of dogs than, that just didn't cope with it as well. But, I know that it was being talked about as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Kevin, I'm sorry, I didn't realize we changed after what, 20 years on animal control? You're not there anymore?
Yeah. Things change, don't they?
Oh, okay.
Did attend the crossing guard breakfast, and I was able to have a number of conversations with the crossing guards, and I expressed my admiration for them and the job that they do. It's not an easy job to do, but all of them have told me what an honor it is to have this job and how they really enjoy it. And it's really amazing, it is a paid position, but it's more of a labor of love than anything else as far as I'm concerned here. And they really love the kids that they, basically take care of. They feel as if they're their own, and they're very dedicated to our city and to make sure that those school-age children or young adults, or whatever you want to refer them to, get to school safely. And that's really, really great. I really admire them, as I know all of us do. I also attended the investment committee with Ms. Santangelo as well. I was glad that Jason was here tonight to answer some questions. I did also talk to him very briefly about coming back at some point, and that's definitely going to happen at some point here. So he does a really good job for us. I'm very impressed with him. I've been through several of those, and he does a very, very, very admirable job for us and his firm. I just want to talk a little bit. I know Mr. Tremblay brought this up at the air show, and it was very successful. However, I did have a conversation with the city manager here, and I was working on Saturday. And my hope is perhaps we can work with them. We've got probably a year to work with them and see what we can do about the noise. There was some aircraft that got my attention when I was working.
F-18s.
Yeah. And maybe there's some opportunities for us maybe to talk to them a little bit about it and see. It could very well be the indelible part of the show. I totally understand that, but there is an impact, and I'm hopeful that we can maybe mitigate some of that in the future. I know it's not on the agenda and we can't get into discussion, but just, some thoughts and some FYI from me. And with that, that's all I have. Yeah.
Well, I'll be short. I attended a policy committee meeting on July 30th, the crossing guard breakfast on the 17th, and an agenda management meeting on the 18th. And I would like to ask the council to close in memory of Toy White. Toy White was a Superior Court judge.
Camarillo resident.
She had been in Camarillo. She's I think a Somas resident. But she used to live in Camarillo. She arrived in this county a single parent, or, a mother with children, a single help me, what am I trying to say here? Single parent family. And after that, she completed college and got her degree to be an attorney, and worked as an attorney. I think she worked in the DA's office, and then she became a Superior Court judge. I respected many of the things she did in the family court and with the Veterans Court, and I would like very much to close in her memory.
Marvelous.
Okay, with that, we will recess back to closed session because we didn't finish